The election is upon us. This drops a week before Election Day. If you can, please make sure to vote, especially up and down, the ballot on the local level, because they're really trying to infiltrate everything. So I wanted to skip the line of regular scheduled program to bring a conversation with folks that have these conversations on the regular. And I'm talking about Q and Ramses, co-hosts, co-founders of Civic Cipher. So in this episode, they talk about from DJing to being part of a national platform for allyship and social justice, hip-hop influence on their mission, and the role of specifically Ramses' older brother, Breonna Taylor of Dilated Peoples, if you know, you know, how to stay civically engaged or even after the election, how to reconcile personal values in a crazy complex election cycle. And Ramses gives Q his flowers, and it's a beautiful moment of their impactful work together. We talk about music, media, meaningful change, this election, and, different views. Basically, it's different views. So I give you the fellas. Hola. Welcome to Word to Your Mama, the podcast that amplifies diverse voices and celebrates shared experiences. Hosted by me, Ritzy P., a Latina creative entrepreneur with a background in art, music, and new web technologies. From Academy and Emmy winners to activists, artists, and builders, we celebrate the rich diversity of my multicultural tribe. There will be special guests, mad laughs, and absolutely no BS. Word to Your Mama drops every Monday on your favorite podcast platform. Let's start it off with, how are you both doing? ¿Cómo están?
Muy bien. Muy bien. Most of the time. We're in the midst of what sometimes feels like a storm, but as Ramses would say, we're doing God's work.
Yeah, we're in a particularly taxing and trying season, but we're kind of built for it. We've already fortified ourselves for this moment in our lives, and so it's definitely work, but I believe that we are excited and optimistic and encouraged. And, not very many people ask us how we're doing. So I appreciate you asking that. That matters.
I'm glad to hear it. I mean, you guys are doing amazing work, but let's kind of start off, a little bit, the beginning part. You guys have been in the business for a long time, music industry, DJs, activism, leadership, all this stuff. Before we get into what Civic Cipher actually is, you go to, you're out on your about, and I see you guys traveling all the time, speaking and doing all this stuff. You guys are at a party, someone asks you, what do you do? Say this happens today, tomorrow. What is your individually? What is the answer? Does it matter what event, or is it the same no matter what? What are we doing?
So if someone asks me that, yeah, it really does. It does matter where the event is, because that shapes the order of the conversation. But
right.
In my heart of hearts, I am three things insofar as my professional life is concerned. Of course, I am a father. I'm a little brother. I mean, you know all about that. I'm a big brother, all those things. But yeah, right. Depending on where I am a broadcaster, professional broadcaster. I've been doing so for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years in a couple more months. Broadcast activist, which I learned a little bit about that from my big brother. His name is Rakaa. And, I'm also a DJ. Shout out to Babu, because he was the inspiration for that. And then I'm also an event host, and that's something that I learned how to do kind of in the in-between. And there are people that know one of those facets about me, and they don't know the other two. And so I'll be hosting an event, making sure that people are having a good time, that sort of thing. And then people find out that I'm a DJ, or people find out I have, I'm on this nationally syndicated radio show, and they're like, oh my God, why did you not tell us this? That's amazing. So, yeah, these things are definitely different disciplines, but it all kind of boils down to entertainment. And I'm sure we'll get into how I went from one to the next to the other. But yeah, it depends on who I am, or sorry, where I am, and who I'm
Right.
talking to, that they'll get the order of what it is that I do. And I'm sure Q's story is pretty similar.
Yeah, at my core, I'm a creator. But how
Mm,
I answer that question doesn't really depend on where I am, but who's asking.
Mm.
Especially
right.
in these times where the country is very tribal and very divided. If I can't tell from looking at a person their political leanings or their ideologies, it's sometimes some hesitation to even say I'm a broadcaster, because that question is
Mm,
always followed up with, well, where can I hear your work? Well,
Mm.
what's the name of your show?
Yeah, that's fair.
And that
mm,
could start a very divisive conversation on the spot with a stranger.
right.
So, and I've told Ramses multiple times, we both DJed for so long and at such a high level that becomes the center of conversations, even in my case when I don't want it to. So I've been in executive board meetings and someone will utter, he was the DJ for the Phoenix Suns. And then I have to watch the room react to that. Sometimes the room is very, very impressed, but sometimes the room is confused. Okay, if he's a
Right.
DJ, why is he in this room with us? And those
Mm,
moments kind of make my stomach turn, because I have
right.
the efficacy, I have the know-how, I have the intelligence to be in this space, but I watch people kind of judge not knowing what the creative space is like, and
Right.
they kind of marginalize me and silo me to being like their entertainment or the help.
Mm,
And
mm,
that's a cringy experience. So yeah, it definitely depends on where we are and who's asking. That's not always as straightforward an answer as you might imagine.
Yeah.
I even forget some of the things that we do when asked
please
that
believe it.
question.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, every guest that I have on here is part of my tribe in some way, right? And the through line is the nonlinear career path. Most of the people I have on of color. I have a few
Mm.
allies, quality Caucasians that I call them that I have on the show.
Mm.
But that's the through line, right? It's we do so many things, and you really have to navigate safety, right? Your
Right.
energy and all these different things. So thank you. I feel like you guys really embody all the things, because I love the point that you said, Q, is when you're in an executive board meeting and you say you're a DJ, and they're like, it's like in their eyes they don't understand the work and the level that you're at, and what that means. That just means you're a leader. That just means that you know how to navigate things, that you're there because of your experience. But for them, you said, then that's definitely going to be a quote, that they look at you like you're the help, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like for them, it disqualifies or lowers your worth, right? What they don't
It absolutely
understand.
does.
Yeah. So no, thank you so much for saying that. So I'm going to ask one of you to explain what Civic Cipher is. But before that, I think it helps to, I'll have the intro in the beginning, but just, quickly, each of you to just give a little context of where you guys are coming from. Where were you guys each born and raised?
So I was born in the 80s, just like my brother, in Detroit, Michigan. So there until I graduated from high school. I went to college in Ohio, played football at Bowling Green State University, and then came to visit Arizona for what I thought would be a 3-day trip 21 years ago. Fell in love with Arizona wintertime because Detroit wintertime is painful and uncomfortable.
It's
Um,
so cold in the D. It's so
it's
cold in the D.
so cold in the D. God bless that young lady for that creative piece of art that she that she put out for us.
Well, I guess my story starts in I was born at Kaiser Permanente, um, in Los Angeles, California. Um, Spent my first formative years in Compton, California. Um, I moved to Arizona in 1990. Out there was gangs and all that sort of stuff, and so my mother um, moved out here and brought me and my two little sisters and my little brother to Arizona. I was just a little kid, and went to school out here. Didn't really have too much control over things. Um, I say this sometimes, but I have to say it here. Um, I have older brothers and older sisters too. And one of my older brothers is an MC in the group. Dilated Peoples. So once his group started platforming nationally, you like that, right?
I see what you got. I see what you
Yeah.
did.
I got that from my dad, from our dad. Once his group started platforming nationally, that kind of brought a bit of a spotlight to me in the city because, in California, everyone is connected to somebody famous, somebody special, somebody doing something that is visible nationally or globally. In Arizona, that wasn't the case. This was before social media and people had the same type of access that was once only reserved for people who were in places like New York or California. So, people started to know about me. I was Raka's little brother, you know what I mean? And I had like friends that I would take to his concerts and that sort of stuff. That ended up putting me around radio people that would promote the shows, and the promoters would advertise on the radio. The people that were fans of his group from the radio station would come out, and I ended up meeting some folks. They said, "Man, law school is for the birds, man. Come be on the radio." And I'm like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, man. Why not? You promoted this show, right?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just proud of my brother." They're like, "Yeah, well, see if you want to do it professionally." So I became an intern, and then turns out that I talk a lot. Got that from our dad too, because he was a great orator, a minister.
Right.
And his father was a minister as well. So ended up being the case that I was a radio personality, worked at the hip hop radio station out here, switched stations, ended up working at a different radio station. That's where Q and I started, and we broadcasted together for many years, again on a hip hop station. And then 2020 rolled around. People was outside protesting, and we are them ones.
Important to point out, Ramses kidnapped me into this. I was not pursuing a career in this side of the business. I'd done some songwriting before, and had been around the world managing artists and managing comedians. Ramses kidnapped me into DJing and pushed me in the pool.
Yeah.
And trusted that I would be able to swim, and that kind of, not forced, because we were already brothers and already doing nonprofit work and community impact together prior to that. But that was when it was like, okay, you're going to be with me now. You're going to be a DJ, and I'm going to make you talk on a microphone no matter how many times you tell me no. So it's important to interject that into this story, because he makes it seem like I so naturally got into broadcasting.
Willingly.
No. Ramses put handcuffs on me, put me in the back of his car, and drove me into this line of work.
Yeah, that was, but it was meant to be. One of the things that, so being in Phoenix, this is probably a different experience for a lot of people around the country, but there was not a strong sense of community among Black people out here. And I was one of those Black people that I had the time in the city. Of course, I had like roots here by that point. And I wasn't like an athlete that just moved here 2 years ago and is going to be leaving next year. I wasn't, I was like actually here on the ground. I was the person on the radio every day. People grew up listening to my show. I was the person that they put on the billboards. I was on TV. I was, they would print magazines and my face would be on the front cover. You had to open it to read anything else. You know what I mean? And that was my truth for many years. And, for those that can't see me, I'm Vanta Black, Black as they make them. So along with that comes a responsibility to ensure that in a place like Arizona, that you're not just taking all the opportunities for yourself. You're doing your best to invest back into not just empowering other people, but creating infrastructure so that, these systems that were in place don't continue to benefit, one type of person. And I'm not trying to make this into that conversation yet. But, a lot of those people that are controlling those systems are unaware that it benefits one type of person and it overlooks often enough other types of people. So my path historically had been, wow, this is crazy. You know what I mean? I should have, if a couple of things had gone different, I would have never left Compton, California. I would have grew up on the streets in Compton and everything that brings. But because I had a fortunate set of circumstances, I was lucky, you know what I mean? I ended up here, and I'm not here because, I've said this quite a bit in my time, but I'm not here because I'm a hard worker. Everybody's a hard worker, you know? I'm not here because I'm smart. Everybody's smart. I'm not here because of anything other than the fact that I had a fortunate set of circumstances. The same systems that further oppressed other people oppressed me. I just was able to kind of navigate them based on, again, a series of fortunate circumstances. So this is, in short, luck. And now that I'm here, I cannot hog all of that luck. I need to create opportunities for other people. So when Q tells that part of the story, there's kind of a responsibility that I felt like I had to him, to not only see what he was capable of, but to ensure, and I've said this, he'll agree, if you trust me, I will not let you fail. You know what I mean? Just give me a little bit of time to get this off the ground, but I see something for you that exists beyond the systems of control that you're up against. And, he could.
It's also important to point out, and I told this story in a room that you weren't in the other day, and I just realized right now that I didn't tell it in front of you. Ramses and I connected when I was working in the alcohol and spirits industry. I then got married, became the road manager for the comedian Earthquake, and moved out of Arizona. My ex-wife's career was taking off, and that took me from Los Angeles to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and then to Barcelona, Spain. And as we were settling in Spain, and she was, she had the #1 song in the country for like 11 weeks or something crazy, my mother had a stroke. And I no longer wanted to be a continent away with my mother dealing with those health issues, which brought me back to the States with a very, very unknown set of circumstances. I had to convince my significant other to leave a massive opportunity behind because I had to go back home. And then I had to set up or create another opportunity for her in Los Angeles so that her career wouldn't stagnate and end, which left me in Arizona, homeless and unemployed. And I say Ramses kidnapped me into this, but what Ramses did was provide an opportunity for me, because our initial connection was him highlighting work that I was doing in the alcohol and spirits industry. But when it came to DJing, and I say he pushed me into the pool, it's important to point out that in his mind, I was an Olympic swimmer. So he was not pushing a infant into this water that could not survive. He was pushing what he thought to be, or what he saw to be, a scuba diver, like an expert level swimmer. I didn't see that in myself, and my brother did. And his only request of me, as he just pointed out, was to trust him and to believe that there was no circumstance under which he would let me fail. And imagine all I had to do was trust him. He created a set of circumstances that could have been grossly inconvenient for him to have to deliver on that promise. And he has over delivered on that promise for me, and now for the father of my children. So he's now also done them well. So, I joked about him kidnapping me into this industry because he did not give me a choice. That part is true. However, the reason he didn't give me a choice is because he saw greater outcomes for me than I could even imagine for myself. And from begrudgingly DJing and then begrudgingly speaking on the mic, I DJed for 20,000 people 4 nights a week for a few years, and now talk into a microphone for a living all over the country. So that's the type of investment that my brother and best friend made in me before I even knew any of that was possible. So I can't let him tell the story without providing that very needed color and context for how this story has now played out.
The support that you guys and respect that you guys have for each other is amazing. And being that hip hop, right? You guys both have deep roots in hip hop. And you're talking about, the young people that are listening or watching may not even know the history of why hip hop started, right? And you guys are giving us stories of examples of the main, what I feel are the main pillars of hip hop, right? You have the different elements of hip hop, but one of the main one is community. speaking the word, telling the truth of what's happening out in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does your deep roots and connections and work in hip hop help you navigate and approach the conversations that you have about social, justice and justice, allyship, civic engagement on Civic Cipher? And if, and whoever wants to take this wants to just give the overview to let people know what exactly Civic Cipher is. But I feel like there's really the root of what hip hop really began with.
Sure. Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I'm going to try to approach it from a couple of different angles. First off, you're absolutely right. Hip hop, for those who didn't grow up with it the way that we did, has always been, there've always been people who have been really authentic to Black culture, Black history, indeed the real roots of hip hop. And then there have been people who look at it like it's, and I'm not trying to assign a value to either, but there have been people who look at it purely like it's an opportunity to make money, something cool to do, whatever. And I'm not knocking any of those people because, clearly they're all creative folks. But I come from the vein of people that had a purist approach to hip hop, the people that wrote stories to give their fans insight into a life that they could not live. They made music for people that was like them, that had similar stories, and they made music that came from the heart, not necessarily so that they could, drive certain cars or, wear diamond rings or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that's something that I feel like, I mentioned my older brother, and he's kind of the North Star in terms of hip hop in my life, because he's been my little brother since I was born. He changed my diapers, you know what I mean? So you're so enamored by your big brothers when you're a little boy that anything that they do, you want to do. Anything they think is cool, you think is cool. So, my path was always, for those that are not familiar with Dilated Peoples, get familiar. I promise you need that in your life. You'll get a chance to see how there's that authentic sort of like community-based brotherhood type of relationship that exists between the members of the group, the community, the city and town where they're from, and that connection to the culture. And, growing up with that, when I first got on the radio and I spoke on a show called Friday Night Flavors. And again, that's a deep cut. So folks that didn't grow up in Los Angeles may not have heard of the original Friday Night Flavors, but it's basically an underground hip hop show. I'm talking backpackers, spray paint, skateboard, graffiti, break dancing, like b-boy stuff, that type of hip hop. And when I got on that show, Phoenix had a version of that. That was the first time I was on the radio. There's this spirit of, staying true, staying, pure. And that was always a part of my journey. And, fast forward when we got to the point where we were doing Civic Cipher, we had just finished a recent underground hip hop show. We called it Radio Solstice, Q and myself. And, once upon a time, we were talking about a story where there was a kid. He was wearing a shirt from an H&M ad, and the shirt said "coolest monkey in the jungle," and the kid was Black. And rather than play some more songs, Q and I had a conversation about that very moment in the news cycle. And our program director kind of got upset, you know what I mean?
More than kind of.
Yeah. So he's like, yo, this is hip hop. We need to, keep the conversation. You can touch on it, but keep it moving. And we felt like that moment deserved a little bit more, but hey, it's your station. Fast forward a little bit more, 2020 happens, and we saw what happened with George Floyd. We saw what was happening outside, and like I said, we are them ones. So we're not the sort of people that was just like, all right, well, that's a problem on the street. We kind of fly above that. We make enough money. We got enough status. We don't have to worry about the police, whatever. Because conceivably, that could have been Like when you've been on billboards for a long time, it's very easy to convince yourself that you fly above the quote
Right.
unquote blackness. OJ's on record saying, I'm not black, I'm a OJ. And you can see how people can get to that point because you've achieved something that not a lot of people, period, get to achieve as a black person. But that's not me. I'm going to be black. If I come back and I'm a different race, I'm going to be black then too. That's how black I am. So, um, you know, and you know, my heart beats for all marginalized people, all people born with a strike against them. And, you know, I'm in a position to share, you know, black people historically have had the loudest voice in this country's history in terms of marginalized people. And one of the things in starting Civic Cipher, and Q can speak to this too, but I had a conversation with a few of my big brothers. You know, I keep talking about Raka, but this is significant and it happened. Raka told me, he's like, do me a favor, Punch. It's a family nickname. He's like, don't forget about the people who were out there protesting with you in 2020. You know, they may need you at some point in the future. Like, you know, you see people out there who are Asian, you see people out there, of course, you know, we live in Arizona, so there's a lot of Mexican people here, Hispanic people. There's, you know, Jewish people, there's people who are Sikh, there are people who are Muslim, there are people who are Buddhist, there are people who are old, young, you know, pick a type of person, they were all out there supporting you. And those folks may need you in the future. And so that same spirit of hip hop that had been in my brother's music, that same spirit that, you know, I saw my brother carry with him, the same culture, you know, he literally spoke it into the show's DNA. And, you know, we symbolically have a clear round table in the studio here. But we share this table with people, you know, during the Stop Asian Hate movement, you know, just like, you know, Asian people participate in hip hop, you know, this is a place where you come participate too. Granted, you know, we have the loudest voice, but we're nothing if we don't share it. We're hypocrites if we don't share it. We're failing our brothers and sisters as their brothers and sisters if we don't share it. And so, this once upon a time we were giving away, you know, we always joke we were once upon a time giving away Cardi B and Migos tickets. You know, 5 years ago that was our life, and we was out partying, and afterwards we would hit the club and DJ, and then our name was on the flyer and our name was on the screen behind us, and people was, you know, getting ready to come see us, put on perfume and have a good time. And, you know, that's hip hop too. But, you know, if I don't get busy for my people and the people that need me, then I'm bogus for that. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, for folks that end up listening to our show, you hear at the end of every single episode, I'm not trying to plug as much as I am, but it's the truth. I can only tell you the truth. You'll hear a song at the end of the show, and it's a song I grew up listening to. It's called Proper Propaganda by the Dilated Peoples. And, you know, it heavily features my big brother, Raka. And I think that if you don't listen to the whole song, you'll listen to the first few bars and you understand right there in Proper Propaganda what I grew up thinking, and then indeed what Civic Cipher is. So yeah.
Thank you for that and giving the history. And, you know, the reason why I wanted to have you, I had the opportunity to have both of you, which is a rare opportunity. I know you guys are super busy doing the work that you do, but this episode comes out the week before this critical election. So I wanted to have folks on that do the work, type of work that you do. And those that are watching or listening, myself included, I just voted. It was pretty, to keep it 1,000, pretty difficult to do the research and figure out how I was going to go with this election. So whoever wants to answer this, or maybe both, with what's happening currently in the world, the devastation of the humanitarian crisis that's happening right now. I know, myself included, so many out there, especially in our community. How do you don't have to go personally if you don't want to, or how would you suggest those in our communities that are trying to reconcile not having a candidate that completely aligns. But I feel like this is a unique situation. Has anyone asked you about this? I know you guys talk about this on your show. What is the advice you can give to those that, haven't voted yet and are like, I don't know what to do?
Neither of us will pretend that that's an easy answer to come up with.
Right.
Because of the space that we provide, we have had members of literally every community that exists, every ethnicity, no matter how you love, no matter how you pray, no matter how you dress, no matter how you think. We've created a safe space here for opinions that are opposed to ours, for people who share a different worldview. We've tried to create a safe, soft landing for everyone to feel like their voice can be heard. And because we demand allyship and we demand for people to align with our progress, we'd be hypocrites to not try to show up for everyone else as well. What we have to remind ourselves, because trust me, we've had moments where we've had to like throw our hands up. When we stood with our brother Sean King at an event that was held here for Palestinian people, and watched people cry and watched people share stories about friends and family who they've lost in this conflict, and had them tell us to our faces that they could not participate in the electoral process here because there was not a candidate for them. And in that moment, what can you say? You cannot push back because you completely empathize and understand what it is that they're dealing with and what they're going through. However, the most troubling thing about this country and our politics is, as much as there are independents and libertarians and different parties present in the political atmosphere, what history has shown us is this is a two-party system. It is a binary, zero-sum, two-party system. And after every election, one of the candidates at the top of those two tickets will be the president. And we have to ask ourselves, which reality would we be most comfortable living in? Which reality lends to itself the idea of progress? Which reality will have us in a position where we can disagree, where we can protest, where we can march, where we can demand more, where we can exercise our right to the accountability that comes with our vote? There is a party that preserves that, even if it doesn't check every box. There is a candidate that gives to the self-determination and dignity of a people that is being so wronged. And then there's a candidate who clearly cares nothing about themselves. So the conversation that we end up having, which is kind of a false equivalence conversation. We often hear people say they're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. And that conversation makes it seem like they're kind of neck and neck. One's a little worse and one's a little better. And I think that's intellectually and emotionally dishonest. One of these candidates is an evil, terrible person. The other, you might consider politics as usual. But politics as usual allows us to vote again in the next election cycle. Politics as usual allows us to disagree, even with the person that we voted for. Politics as usual allows us to organize and to have a show and share opinions that might spit in the face of either or both candidates. The other side of this thing might change everything that we consider to be fundamental to this country, from freedom of speech to the right to vote, to women's reproductive health, to further marginalized communities across this country. Things that we once thought were rights are now being stripped away. And I having a conversation with Ramses just last night, and with some of our listeners and viewers. My mother, right, my daughter's grandmother, had more rights before my daughter was born than my daughter has now. That should be a terrifying reality for people, right? So we have to continue to fight for what's right for people all over the world, not just us. But there's an immediate threat to us And we have to handle that accordingly for there even to be a possibility for the outcomes that we want later. So I feel there is an outcome where those possibilities exist, and there is an outcome where they don't. And that was how I made the decision on how I was going to participate in this civic process.
Yeah. How do you say it better than that? I think that if I add anything, I'll try to just make it concise, but you know, maybe this analogy will help. You know, Q can jump in and help me with the figures, but you know, let's say we're owed a debt. A lot of people are having this conversation right now. We've been voting this whole time, and we haven't received blah blah blah. So we're owed a debt. Let's call that debt, for the sake of round numbers, $100. And then there's a candidate that says, "I see that you're owed $100. I have $10 for you." That would be hurtful and insulting. I understand and respect that. That would be something worth pushing back on, especially given the history. How are you only going to give me $10 when you clearly acknowledge that you owe me $100? And it's incredibly frustrating. But as Q mentioned, in a binary system, if the other person is saying, hey, this is going to cost you $20, then it makes the choice a little easier. Okay, one person's going to give me $10 of the 100 I'm owed, which, sure, that's not everything, but that's not nothing. The other one's going to cost me more than $10. So now I'm upside down $120 if that reality sets in.
And tell you that you're not owed $100.
And not even acknowledge the original ailment, the original transgression or injustice. And so, to put it in simple terms, this is kind of how we have to think about it. Now, again, we had a conversation with Ambassador Susan Rice recently. She's a global ambassador for the United States of America, or former. You know, she's retired now, but she has a lot of insight into what's going on the ground in Palestine. That's something that we've covered extensively, not just on Civic Cipher, but on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast. We have hours and hours and hours of content from Palestinian activists, people that we know and love and respect, people that have prayed in this studio.
Gracias for listening or watching Word to Your Mama. I have a unique cross-section of guests on here because I'm a purpose-driven creative consultant who thrives at the intersection of creative innovation, technology, and community impact. There are a few ways we could work together, so check out ritzyperiwinkle.com to learn more.
Because, pray 5 times a day if you're Muslim, people that we feel blessed to be in their presence. Now, I would say that we consider these people brothers and sisters. And I've said it before, I grew up with Jewish people personally. I've always loved Jewish people. My conversation about Jewish people has never been about who they are as a people or anything like that. I never had an issue with anybody Jewish. I've never even been harmed a little bit by anybody who was Jewish. I couldn't even tell you a bad story about one Jewish person I've ever met in my life. But Israel is a different story. Israel we've been critical of Israel's response in Palestine, to say the least. And yet and still, we've had Jewish people, conservative Jewish people on the show to say their piece. Our personal position, of course, is that Palestinian people deserve better. They deserve our support. They deserve their humanity and their dignity. They deserve their own state. They deserve whatever self-determination that they feel is appropriate. I'll say it 100 more times. I'd say it with a gun to my head. I'm that one. You know what I mean? I get in trouble a lot of times because Q be like, you don't have to say it that way. And I'll be like, dang, you're right. But I said it already. So, but, and fortunately, the Jewish people that I know and love in my life hold space for that reality to be true. You know what I mean? Even the conservative folks that we have on the show, they're like, I get it. I understand, but how that factors into an election, even if that was a single issue, there's one candidate that's going to tax everybody another $20. There's one candidate that's saying, I want Netanyahu to finish the job. There's another candidate that it's at least acknowledging, as Q mentioned, acknowledging the debt and saying something. And again, in a binary system, as Q mentioned, where one of those two people is going to be the president, and that's a singular issue, not to mention all of the rest of the issues that human beings encounter in life. And this is the most powerful position on earth. So it affects a lot of people. It is one of those things where it's, as Q mentioned, it's not an easy thing to reconcile, but if the choice is $10 or owing $20, and those are the only two options, for me, again, $10 is not zero, and it's not more debt. So as calloused as that sound, I promise with every fiber of my being, it doesn't come from a calloused place. My heart breaks every time I share content right now about what's happening in Palestine. We have dedicated so much bandwidth of both of our shows to making sure Palestinian voices are amplified. We have never, nor would we ever say anything negative about Jewish people. Again, Israel, they can get it with both barrels, but Jewish people will always be in our hearts. I found out the number of Jewish people on earth, and I was like, how is it that few Jewish people? What a heartbreaking number. Found out how many Palestinian people in the world. It's so heartbreaking to know that there's that few Palestinian people. Why are we even here? But if I vote one way, there might be a few more Palestinian people left than if I vote the other way, which would be inconceivable for me. So my vote was cast the way that it was cast. And for me, that's a vote for Kamala Harris. I don't have a problem sharing that, so
Yeah.
It's tough, but the only person that would get everything right in terms of being a candidate representing me is me. So I take the flaws with the candidate that I feel is going to do more than the other.
And the only candidate that we have available to us, even including our current president when he was running, that has made mention of the self-determination of Palestinian people, that they deserve their own state, that there needs to be a ceasefire immediately. Because people are like, well, how do we know they mean it? Well, they're either all lying or all telling the truth. We have to operate in good faith here. And if we're assuming that everyone's telling the truth and only one candidate has even mentioned the possibility for life and abundance and self-determination and dignity and prosperation for, or the ability to prosper for an entire nation of people, only one candidate has even spoken that type of language. Again, given the choices that we have, I cast the same vote and have no problem saying that out loud as well, because I want there to be a greater solution, but I want us to be able to get there. And there's someone who's made it very, very clear it's his way or the highway, like literally.
Yeah. It's a crazy place to be in at this moment, for sure. I mean, I'm meditating. One of the only things that's helping me is trying to find joy. Being with your nephew, seeing him, navigate this world, meditating, doing that type of stuff. It's a lot of shit hitting at once. When I went to cover the DNC, I was told when Biden was still running.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't even know if I can go. Like, I don't even know if I want to do that. Then Kamala was, the person last minute. And I was like, still a little conflicted.
Sure.
And I was like, so I spoke to those around me that understand, know me well, know my politics. And they're like, this is a great opportunity that, we did the pros and cons. And so I got there first time talking to everybody, trying to, engage with our people, go to different caucuses, the indigenous, the Black, the, Hispanic, blah, blah, blah. And we were there to do shows. It was amazing. At a Black-owned studio to do the other show that I do. One thing that I think gave me some type of hope is that I went to the Latino Leaders Network DNC luncheon. They had the top of the top. And I was a little nervous about that situation as well. I was like, well, how is this going to be? Is this going to be where it's just respectability, politics and da 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 da? I'm just going to have to bounce. I was going to go solo. As soon as I walked in, registered, got my thing, it was the networking part before you got, the full course meal luncheon situation. Then this is when I knew that multiple things could be true at the same time. Because politics, being in this world, it was like an anthropological excursion for me, right? To be around a group of people that, live the life of being part of the government, DC life. So I'm just you fly on the wall. Da, da, da. So as soon as I walk in, who do I see? I see someone wearing a kufiya. And I was like, beeline to that person. Immediately. A brown person, because especially, the politics within my community is that, there's those of us that, can present different ways. He was brown as hell and he had a kufiya. And on the kufiya, it says Democrats for a free Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? Immediately, what is your name? What do you, and he was telling me a little bit of his journey. And I was like, okay, I don't feel that I'm the only one that can feel this way and be vocal about it. And so that helped me to kind of have a little bit of hope. And then there was a side exhibit of visual artists who I didn't even like, are friends of mine. It was an exhibit of art. They were speaking for those, for marginalized, for what's happening. And I was like, okay. So having this conversation with you guys, thank you so much for always keeping it real and sharing that part of when I asked the question of how do you advise people to reconcile where we're literally at right now. So with the work that you guys are doing individually with Civic Cipher, beyond the vote and beyond of what's going to happen, what are ways that people should be engaged when it comes to, social justice efforts beyond election, no matter who is elected, who wins? What does that look like? What can that look like?
So getting out to vote is the most obvious and straightforward way to participate in our nation's and even in your city's political infrastructure. Ramses and I went to a sort of community rally event recently for Black people. It was called the Block Party, of course. And there were some notable Black celebrities there, some notable Latinx celebrities there, and some notable politicians. And as we stood in observance, we didn't poke holes because we appreciated that they were even doing something where Blackness was supposed to be centered. Well, some of it was done kind of clumsily because not everyone that's not from here knows really how to engage the different groups of Black people. We go back and forth with the idea that, our people say very proudly nowadays, Black people are not a monolith. And I think we feel the need to say that so that people understand that we are culturally, ethnically, ideologically, intellectually diverse as a people. We're not all hip hop. We're not all jazz. Right. We're not all soul food. We're not all African American. So we say that to remind people that we are not singular, but that is on the flip side a weakness, because those who oppose us are a monolith. They can disagree on 100 different things, but the one thing that they agree on is that we are lesser than they are. We are worth less. Our lives mean less. Our self-determination means less. Us being prosperous means less. And we can agree on everything except one thing, and that will splinter us indefinitely. So as we were present at this event, we understood that all of us are not on the same page with regards to this election or really any election. And one of the main things with Civic Cipher that Ramses has always insisted from its very beginning, when we were more like Martin and Malcolm than we are now, where, you know, Ramses was the eternal optimist and I was the aggressive realist, is that we have to create a road to redemption. We have to create or build a bridge back for those who have gone to, you know, whatever the, you know, imagination will tell you is the other side. And it cannot be a hostile endeavor or people will never come home. So we hosted a conversation with Black men in the city of Phoenix from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all faiths, um, different lifestyle choices than ours. And we got into a room and we closed the door and we made it a place where we could disagree and express ourselves and be vulnerable and be wrong and be loud and wrong, but still be loved and protected and insulated. And that was the start of what we both think should happen moving forward. We have to have a collective voice represent us in order for us to have power. As long as we are splintered and all fighting for 100 separate causes, it's going to be very difficult to get the progress that we want. So to organize and come up with a set of circumstances that would be the best for the most, right? Because as Ramses said, the only person that's going to give you everything you want is you. Who's going to give us most of what we want? And what is most of what we want? What things can we agree are important to all of us collectively? And figuring out a way to financially support those agendas, because this is the United States of America Incorporated.
Please believe it.
As much as it's a democracy, as much as, you know, this is the American dream, this is a corporation, folks. So uniting and having some fiscal backing helps. So I think, and I'm not an expert. I won't pretend to be. I know sometimes we sound like we know all of what we're talking about. A lot of this is imagination and guessing. We're trying things here, but we do know that collectively we are so much stronger. So, you know, organizing and creating community within one another and finding a way to push forward with it doesn't have to be a singular agenda, but at least a collective one, so that we have some power when we're out here pursuing progress and change.
One of the things that we say, not even on the show, we say this, you know, Q and myself, we say this as we're reminding ourselves of who we are and our path, the one that led us to where we are and the path that lies in front of us, as a way of kind of keeping us fortified and keeping us on the same page. Not that we need that. It's just, these are conversations we have in airports or hotel rooms, or, you know, just before we go on some panel on some stage in some city we've never been to or whatever, is that we're greater than the sum of our parts. And, you know, for those that don't follow that colorful language, it means it means that 1 + 1 = 7, right? So 1 by itself, Ramses by himself is Ramses, Q by himself is Q, but together we are so much more. And I think that philosophy extends to, you know, sort of what Q is saying, to say that, you know, the more we're on the same page, the more we can accomplish something. We can, just a handful of us as a voting bloc can sway the entire culture, political culture of this country. And, you know, it's hard to get people on the same page because everybody wants what they want. Sure. The problem is that everybody wants what they want first and right now. And on the scale of a country, change is slow. And on the scale of a human, we want change fast, immediately. We want change in 2 years, 3 years, you know what I mean? And it doesn't always work that way. You know, it took 400 years or 300, however many 100 years it was, to get through slavery, Jim Crow, and the civil rights era. You know what I mean? That was hundreds of years. There were people that were born, lived, and died many times over.
And their children and their children.
Exactly. And then there are those of us now who are like, well, we didn't get police reform, and that's what we wanted since 2020, and this administration hasn't done it. And they don't go deep enough because a lot of people are what's referred to as low impact voters and people that just are not as intimately familiar with politics. So they don't know, that you need to vote down ballot in order to get measures across. They don't know that you need a president, but you also need a support system so that the president can get things done that you want. The administration that made promises can deliver on those promises if indeed we, the electors, have provided them with the infrastructure necessary to do that. And so it's important to bear that in mind. But to your question, one of the things so our show, Civic Cipher, we do host the Black Information Network daily podcast. We are journalists, and we discuss topics in the news and all these sorts of things on that show. Our show that we own together is Civic Cipher, and on that show, the purpose of that show has been to empower allies. We created that show because we looked on the streets and we saw Black women leading and Latin women leading, believe it or not. Poder in Action, Chicanos por la Casa, we saw them out protesting and getting in front of the police. And to be fair, we saw white people, white paws, white people against white supremacy. Those were the people that walked us to and from our cars when we had our babies. They knew who we were. They knew how important we could be. And they made sure that we weren't around if things were getting crazy and the police weren't messing with us. Those allies and that leadership, all female leadership, we learned that we needed to provide support for them, and we needed to get their message to allies. Black people, we've been Black our whole lives. Latin people been Latin their whole lives. Marginalized people, gay people, pick a struggle. Funny how it sounds, but everybody typically are born into the circumstances that they are in that causes them to be relegated to the margins of a society. For us, we knew that sharing information, sharing leadership, sharing ideas with people that did not grow up with that struggle, that was the infrastructure that was missing. That was critical infrastructure that was missing. And the only thing that those activists had on the street was bullhorns. And, Q and I say it all the time, a bullhorn can reach 200 or 300 people, but a radio station can reach 200 or 300,000 people, especially if it's the hip hop station, because now we're reaching people who are familiar with the culture, who to a degree partake in the culture, and people who could potentially show up and support. And these are people that would be more inclined to listen to what we say versus what they're saying on Channel 12, which is, oh, these guys are out rioting and starting problems with the police. No, we weren't. Again, we're out there with our children. Q has a newborn at the time, So
and she was 3 or 4 months old.
There you go. You know what I mean? And then Adonaiah was, he might have been, what, 5, 4? Yeah, it was 4 turning 5. So, imagine being out there with little kids. They took pictures of Adonaiah out there because he was so young, holding his sign that he wrote in his little scribbles or whatever. So the show that we have that's created for allies, the culture of our show is to share Black perspectives, share Latin, Asian, Native. We have different programs that we do and continue to try to do, to share that content with people who are not from those communities. We want you to listen to our show and learn the talking points and learn the tools and learn the perspectives, so that you can share that at Thanksgiving with your uncle that is a far right MAGA champion. We want you to share that at your workplace when you're around the water coolers and you hear those guys talking, the good old boys, talking a little reckless. We want you to have the tools you need to feel empowered to share that perspective and make the changes in your life, in your individual journey. And I think that together, by building this infrastructure in a place where we're most likely to find allies, again, hip hop stations around the country, giving them those tools. Now, those people know what it feels like to hear the N-word. Now, those people know what it feels like to be Black and walking down the street at night. Because they know what it feels like to be white and walking down the street at night, sure. But do you know how scary you are to me if you feel a little uncomfortable, that could be the last day I'm alive. You know, so I'm across the street before you even get over here. You know what I'm saying? These people need perspectives that they might not otherwise have. They need to know that they can overlook things. They're blind spots. And we do our best to learn in real time on our show about our own blind spots. We're not above it.
Right.
We're not
Right.
preaching here. We are doing our best to, again, facilitate honest conversations where we're sharing and where we learn. We eat crow on our show all the time. If we make a mistake, because we hold our show to, you know, the highest journalistic standards as we can. Everything that we do is data driven and well researched, and our perspectives are formulated around that. But there are times when we get it wrong too, and we have to apologize. We're not above that. We have to say we got this wrong, and it doesn't happen often because we're thorough. But I say that to say that we are two human beings. We are two spirits inhabiting two bodies, having a human journey, doing our best to be brothers and to teach everyone else how to be brothers and sisters, leading by example. And so for people that can do more than vote, we ask that you learn perspectives. We ask that you challenge, I think they're called microaggressions in your own lives. We ask you to stand up for us when you're in a room that we're not in. We ask that you make the subtle changes in your life that collectively will turn into waves that over time can make some real impact on the culture in this country. I know that I speak for the both of us because Q, as he mentioned, is historically the realist, but I'll speak for the both of us. We really do believe that's possible. That's why we do the show. We really think that if you're listening to me, we think that you're capable of it. We think your friends, we think your family is capable of it. We think your community is capable of it. And if we got to go first, we'll go first. You know what I mean? But you're listening to two of your brothers right now and one of your sisters. So, but yeah.
Love that. So before we wrap it up, congratulations on being syndicated, you know, being all over. I see, like I said, mentioned earlier, you guys traveling all over the place, speaking. What does the future look like for Civic Cipher? You know, how is it evolving? What do you see? What are the plans, you know, in the next coming years?
Well, it's all good stuff. You know, we are going to, in the coming months, add an additional 96 radio stations to our syndication network. That'll bring us to 170 radio stations around the country. Yeah.
Baby, see that? That's amazing.
Yeah. Imagine two guys that quit one station because they didn't want to give us the airtime to highlight the Black voices and the Black leadership on the streets. We quit one station, never thinking that we would work in radio again, to now here we are. It won't even be 5 years later.
Taking
on
over
170 radio stations, you know, doing work that's meaningful. We don't have to give away Cardi B tickets. We don't have to have ratings. We get to do the work that matters. And it's a bigger platform than ever. And not because we want to be the men, but it's validating to know that we're doing something that we believe is working and that there are a lot of people empowered to support that. These powerful people that are able to green light swaths of radio stations around the country agree with the tone of the show, the temperament of the two hosts, the messaging, and that the future that we believe is possible, they believe it's possible too. So that validation really matters. So growth for the show. We have, as you mentioned, lots of speaking engagements on our calendar, and a lot more pop up all the time. I think we fly to Michigan tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff to do today too. And you know, we got stuff next weekend. We got to go to LA. We got, you know, just these things that keep happening. We have a book that's coming out, and our agent and our publisher that we're working with at present, they kind of loosely told us that, you know, 2026 is a good year for that to drop. We didn't love that because we wanted it to come out sooner, but you know, they know what they're doing and we're still learning. Right. So I can't really speak too much more on that right now, just because there's a lot of people involved, but it's coming. It's coming. And that feels very, very, very special because of the magnitude of the people and the companies and corporations behind that book, we would have never thought we'd be working with people that are that high up, that are on that level, that found us from their mountaintop and says, hey, I think there's something special here. We'd like to put some infrastructure and some support behind it. We do literature. Let's help you guys package this in a way that, you know, people who take books and read them can get the most out of it. And, you know, so that's something that we've been working on. I'm gonna make sure Q gets all his flowers for that, because I'm, you know, as often as I get a chance to, I will take a moment and say, I love you. Thank you for believing in this and trusting me, because watching you do the things that I could never do helps me to know that back when I was like, all right, here, jump on the turntables, I'm leaving. Good luck. You know, it all turned into something. So I knew that this would come, but to know that you have such a magnificent way of writing and helping us tell our story is, I'm really excited to share that with people. You know, we're going to keep pushing with this election. We've made a lot of connections that we believe are going to, you know, be fruitful in the future. And again, growing the footprint of the show, growing our outreach and the types of outreach that we can do. You know, we're not above having conversations about television. Indeed, we've had some and other forms of like broadcast media. And we're kind of, it's interesting because we exist in the media space, of course, but we also exist in the activist space. So sometimes we're interviewing people, and sometimes clearly we're the ones being interviewed for our activism. And so there are things that I would imagine, cannot conceive of that are forthcoming as well. Because if you would have asked me at any point in time, would it ever look like this? No, it's inconceivable. So we're riding the wave. And I think that if I had to say it, I'd just say that I hope that we're doing right by everyone. It certainly feels like we're trying to. So yeah, lock in with us.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And, you know, especially with the technical difficulties that we had in the beginning, let the folks know how they can, you know, especially for those that aren't watching, that are listening, how they can find Civic Cipher and your daily podcast and you guys individually.
Civic Cipher everywhere. CIVICCIPHER. Civic Cipher on every social media, everywhere you can find anyone, you can find Civic Cipher
Except
there.
X. We don't do that.
Yeah, we are in protest with the people over at X. So we had to get up out of there because they were throwing that N-word around very liberally over
Say
there.
that.
I am Q Ward on the social media that I am on.
And then you can find me at Ramses Ja, RAMSESJA. For folks that really do want to provide the sort of support that we need right now, we're doing our best to grow our everything, sure, but YouTube in particular, because you know, there's a lot of reasons for it, but you know, every time we get a subscriber or a group of subscribers on YouTube, we're like really excited, because that's kind of a newer endeavor for us, because we're radio folks, you know what I mean?
Right.
And now that there are all these important folks in our ecosystem, they're looking at these other things and they're like, okay, let's get this going. Let's ramp this up. And we're like, whoa. Okay, I guess we need to do that. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
But we didn't anticipate getting to this point. So now that we're here, you know, your support goes a long way. It is possible to donate to the show. Again, you can go to civiccipher.com if you feel so inclined. A lot of people around the country support the program. And that's one way that you can support us on our journey.
Subscribe, like, and share.
There you go.
Everywhere.
Right.
And the iHeartMedia app
is where you find the podcast.
Is where you'll find both podcasts.
Yeah. So the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, we both host that. And then Civic Cipher is on there as well. So
and any other DSP as well, where you find
Spotify
podcasts.
or if you're on Apple Podcasts or whatever, it's all over the place. But our partnership, our distribution is through iHeartMedia for Civic Cipher, and then iHeartMedia owns the Black Information Network and the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and so we have a great relationship there. But again, you can get that anywhere. So it's all there. Civic Cipher. If you just Google that, it's all there. It's we don't spell it with a Y. We had to try our best to be grown-ups at the same time as being hip hop, just in case we didn't know how far the show would go. Glad we did it the way we did, but I realize that a lot of people are super hip hop. We are too, but we spelled it with an I, Cipher. And so you Google that, and everything that you could possibly want will come up. We'd appreciate your support, and we'd also appreciate, if anybody has anything to share with us. As I mentioned, we're still learning. So, if you got something to share, topics, ideas, anything that you feel like we need to know about, we do read all of our emails, and we're two men doing what we do. So we're not flying above anything here. You can reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, fellas. I really, really appreciate it. I love the respect and the love that you share for each other, and not having, any shame in the game to tell another man right next to you that you love them. We need people to see and hear this. And I really appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing, that you will continue to do. I feel like our communities and the allies and the new allies that will be created because of the work that you're doing are in good hands. So, muchísimas gracias.
De nada.
Word to Your Mama is owned and produced by Ritzy P. Intro beat produced by Nico Beats. For partnership inquiries and contact info, check out wordtoyourmama.com. And as always, Word to Your Mama is brought to you by ritzyperiwinkle.com. And now, introducing
the Supernatural Bear Corner.
Supernatural Bear.